The difference between a very successful investment and a very mediocre one very often comes down to this idea of competitive moats. But how to actually apply this idea is very often misunderstood. And so in this video, we're going to talk about a very easy way you can kind of get a better understanding and actually apply this idea of competitive moats. Now, my name is Drew Cohen, and I worked at Goldman Sachs. I worked at Capital Group, which manages trillions of dollars. In fact, my research and analysis has directed billions of dollars into various different investments in the past. Currently, I'm an investment advisor, and I also run Speedwell Research, which produces long-term investment research that we sell to various hedge funds and asset managers. And so I say all of this so you know that I have a lot of experience analyzing businesses and actually making investment decisions on that analysis. Let us get back, though, to this idea of a competitive moat. Now, I'm sure you've heard this from Warren Buffett, some other great investor out there, because people talk about it all the time. The reason why it's important is because when you have a business and you put money into that business, if it does well and you came up with like a really good idea, it is going to generate a really high return on capital. That means that the money you're putting in is making a lot of money. What that does, though, is it tends to attract competition. So now competition enters the field, and what happens? It drives that return down. And so now when you once had a very nice business that was making a very high return on capital, competition came in and it fell. Now, this is really important though. There is something that can prevent this business from getting attacked basically by competition. And that is what is called a competitive moat. And so if a business has a strong competitive moat, what that means is that competitors cannot easily mimic what they are doing, and thus that business retains its high return on capital, and thus you as an investor get to enjoy higher than average returns. And so that is the whole game of investing, at least when you're investing for the long term. You're trying to find these high quality businesses that can invest capital at high rates of return and have this competitive moat that allows them to do that sustainably over a long period of time, so you benefit from compounding. Now, today, though, we're focusing on how to actually apply this idea of competitive moats, because I've seen it misapplied all the time. People will think just because a company has tens of millions of customers that they must have a competitive moat, or they'll call like incumbency advantage a competitive moat, which it's not. There's other factors that could flow from that it could be. But in short, I want you to think of a competitive moat just like this. A competitive moat means that you are doing something that others cannot do easily. I'll repeat that. A business is doing something that others cannot do easily. That is what a competitive moat is. And so you want to look for businesses that are doing something that the competitors cannot copy that easily. And if they can't copy it, they can't offer a similar service. And so you don't have that same sort of competition, that same price pressure, that same fighting for the customers. Now, there's many examples of great companies that have strong competitive moats. I'll talk about a few of them right now. One of the first ones that always comes to mind when people talk about these great companies is Costco. And it's a little ironic because on the one hand, they're a retailer. You can buy a lot of the items you can buy at Costco at many different places. And it's actually very easy to go into business and just open up a retail store and sell stuff. There's a lot of them too, right? Competitors at Costco include, Walmart, Target, a lot of other businesses. And so there is still a lot of competition. And yet somehow Costco is able to stand out and have higher returns on invested capital versus competitors and is able to sustainably do so. And so the question of how they're able to do that is their competitive moats. And in their case, and it's going to be different for every business, in their case, it stems from the fact that they have mass scale purchasing power. That purchasing power, though, is enabled by the fact that they sell in bulk. Since they sell in bulk and their customers buy in bulk, it makes it easier for them to offer lower prices on a per unit basis. Them placing their stores in areas that are far away, usually from the main city center, means that they're going to save on real estate, but also, and more importantly, they can have a massive warehouse that stores all of these bulk items in the first place. So even if you're Walmart and you want to offer discounts, you can't do it quite as easily as Costco because Walmart customers don't buy in bulk the same way. Their stores don't have the same kind of room to store huge pallets of inventory. I mean, Costco really isn't a store, it's more a warehouse. And that is just a few of the reasons why they're able to have this higher return on capital and able to sustainably defend it. And so going back to that question, are they doing something others cannot copy easily? The answer is yes. And that is because when you have $250 billion of sales annually, you have so much scale that allows you to get such a large rate of rebates and discounts from your vendors that you can then pass off to your customers that no one else can enter that area easily. You will not be able to get the same deals they get, which means you can't offer your customers the same prices. And with Costco's, there's also the membership aspect. And so you do have all these customers that care about that value prop already shopping at Costco and tied to them with the membership. And so if you try to compete against them, you can't just offer something similar, which would be very hard to do. You would have to offer something better because you have to actually get those customers to leave Costco and you have to get them to go against their habit. And so that's just a few reasons why Costco is able to have this competitive moat. And again, what is the key question we're asking there? Are they doing something others cannot copy easily? Yes. Walmart themselves has Sam's Club, and they have not been that competitive against Costco. There's, BJ's warehouses, there's a bunch of them, and Costco still stands out. Even when they're in like for like neighborhoods, they perform better. And so that is one example. There's so many others though. Perimeter Solutions, that's a company we recently researched, and they make fire retardant foam. If you've ever seen the foam dropping from different planes during a wildfire, we had that here in LA pretty recently, and I actually saw live them dropping all this fire foam to stop the fires from advancing. That is their product. And as you can imagine, it is a product that can never fail and that has to also be delivered to these different fire departments on time and very rapidly. And when there is a wildfire, they have to be able to restock it very quickly. And so their competitive moat that stops competitors from entering that space are a few. For one, they have a long history of doing it, which just means people trust the product. The second, they have IP protections around their specific formula. And then third, and perhaps most important, is they have this whole logistics network that is tied to their manufacturing footprint that allows them to very quickly make this stuff, to store it, and then to deliver it anywhere in the country where it's needed in under 24 hours. And again, sometimes in huge amounts. When this was happening in LA, they had to mobilize their entire logistics network to direct all of this refills of fire retardant foam to the Los Angeles area. And they also set up mobile bases too to have planes actually land and fill it up. And they actually sometimes have equipment directly on these airfields. It's their equipment that they invested in order to do this quickly. And they can also set up mobile bases too if that's necessary. So the advantages there though, there's multiple of them. You have the IP protecting the actual product. You have the logistics network. You have the fact that fire departments trust them and use them. And then there's also the fact that you cannot use multiple different fire retardants together in the same sort of aerial tank because the chemicals, will mix and corrode. And that's actually exactly what happened when a competitor did try to enter the space. Is even though the product maybe worked as a standalone, when you put it together into the actual field service, it turned out it was corroding a lot of these different aerial carriers. And they're not so clear on why that is. It could be there's some cross-contamination. It could be that their force of people they have to clean all this wasn't up to the same, quality standards as Perimeter Solutions. Whatever it is, either way, Perimeter Solutions has a very strong moat in that regard. It's a very hard business to enter. And there's been a few that have tried, and right now no one else is actually competitive to them with that same product. And so that's another example there of how you can create something that others cannot copy easily. There's a lot of examples that could come to mind. Apple with an iPhone, there's lots of people that try to copy them, but the software integration is just not still as good. A lot of people will try to copy Instagram and different social networks. The fact that your friends aren't on there, it's not going to be the same experience. And so there's lots of different examples there. The next thing though that I want to talk about is kind of this easy test you can do. And that is what I'll call the market cap test. If I were to give you the entire value of a business's market cap in cash, can you go and disrupt that business? That is a key question. And so, Instagram is not a standalone traded company. They are a part of Meta, of course, but let's just play and say that Instagram was a standalone stock and its valuation was $1 trillion. If I were to give you $1 trillion, could you go and get everyone off of Instagram and onto your new copycat Instagram app? That's $1 trillion. You could pay people cash to sign up. You could do whatever you want. Would you be able to do it? And that is a key question to understanding sort of the moats with Instagram. I personally don't think that you'd be able to do it, even with $1 trillion. I think you might be able to spawn, a somewhat successful social app that gets activity, but once the payments and subsidies go away that you're giving to people to use that app, I think that they'd go back to Instagram. And that's because Instagram already has all your friends. It has all your data, all your posts. Some people have been on this for well over a decade. People do get sentimental about, the posts they have on there. They have all your messaging activity. It's very much a habit. They have all your data, which allows you to have a customized feed. They have not just all these people on there, but all these businesses on there. And so even if you were to give someone, $1 trillion, personally, I think that you'd have a pretty hard time still competing with them. And so my point is not that you should believe me on that. If you disagree, that's fine. The point is the test. What do you think would happen? And do you think that the business that was built up has such strong competitive moats that even giving someone this incredible amount of cash equivalent to their market cap is not enough to destroy them? And if that is the case, that you don't think they'll be impacted by that, there's a good chance they have a very strong competitive moat. Constellation Software, which is a business that owns a lot of these very small vertical market software companies, comes to mind in this regard, because they'll buy a company that does something like, all of the medical record data management for, a pain clinic or something like that. And that is the business. It may not be a very big business, but the business that they have is very hard for them to lose because it's mission critical for the customers. And so if you do run that pain practice and you're using their data management software, you are so scared of leaving them and something breaking, your data not coming over. And it's also the fact that as long as it works, it's generally a small cost of your overall expenses. You're going to want to just keep it there. And there's no real reason to switch it. And so it's sticky, it's mission critical, it's a small portion of overall cost. And that's why it tends to be such a strong business. People don't ever leave, and that does give you a little bit of pricing power. And so Constellation Software owns a collection of just thousands of these little vertical market software businesses. Some of them are so niche, they'll do like chicken coop software. And the reason why I'm bringing up this though, is that they're very acquisitive, and some of these businesses they're buying for like $3 million, $5 million tends to be usually what they spend. But the $5 million they're spending, they would not be able to recreate that business for that same amount of money. It would take much more. And if someone came in with, $25 million, almost 5 times the amount that they are buying this business for, they probably wouldn't be able to disrupt it because, again, the customers are so stuck on the software. It may integrate with everything else. Moving it could mean, they lose revenue for several days. It could mean that, customers get upset. If you're talking about the medical field like we were earlier, and you lose records, that's, a big no-no, and that could get you in a lot of trouble, penalties, fines, all that. And so there's a lot of reasons why they're just going to stick to doing what they're doing as long as it's good enough and works. And so that's an area where if you were even to come up with a lot of cash, you couldn't actually really hurt that business. And that's another way you could think about it. Can a competitor really hurt my business? And there's a lot of businesses where the answer is yes. If you think about food delivery or ride hail, one of the easiest ways you could hurt a competitor is you just offer people subsidies and they go and they leave and they try the new one. Now, that's not sustainable long term. And what we've seen in those markets is basically a pulling back of kind of that capital and people acting, more rationally, which is kind of a topic for another video. But the point there is that if they wanted to, and if, SoftBank's Masa Son decided to put another $10 billion into DoorDash and says, I actually want to dominate all the markets Uber Eats are big in, they can cause Uber Eats a lot of trouble by doing that. Whereas in contrast, if you put $10 billion into McDonald's and said, I want to, become an even bigger, fast food restaurant, probably wouldn't really have much of an impact on a lot of other restaurants. Maybe if they're offering huge discounts, then it could, hurt, Taco Bell, Burger King, Popeyes, whatever fast food chain. But then once those subsidies went away, you kind of go back to normal. And so that's just an instance where, cash coming in can be disruptive, certainly, but it can't really hurt a competitor long term unless, you could sustain that level of subsidy long enough to put someone out of business, which was kind of the hope, by the way, with some of these food delivery and ride hail wars. They wanted to subsidize people long enough that they could get enough market share and other people couldn't really enter it. And then by the time you get to a certain scale advantage, then it's even harder to compete against the incumbents. And that's kind of the game theory there. But hopefully you get a better understanding of what a competitive moat is and how to test for that by just simply thinking, what are the things that this business can do that others cannot do easily? And then also thinking, if I were to receive the entire market cap of this business in cash, how much damage would I be able to do to this business? Would I be able to recreate this business in full? And if the answer is no, then there's a very good chance that you have a strong competitive moat you're looking at, and one that's potentially not overvalued either. And so hopefully this video was helpful. And if you want to learn more though about how to analyze a business and investing, make sure you hit like and subscribe. And we have much more coming in the future. And if you have any questions, topics you want us to cover, go ahead and drop them in the comments below, and we will get to it soon. Thank you for listening.